Welcome to the Quiet Authority. I am your host, Seth Sherapak, and today we're going to talk about a very, very important topic that seems to be really popular on my YouTube channel, and that is multiplying your income and the number one rule of doing so. This is something I've been helping people do for a long time now. If you're watching this, you're either a business owner already, but you've maxed out your time and your energy and you want to make more, but you don't want to work more. You can't work more, or you want to work a little bit less than you are. So you can spend more time doing the things you love, spending time with your family, and you don't want to be devoured by the thing you're doing to make a living. Now, you're probably in a very similar position if you don't own your own business yet, and you've realized that you can increase your income or you can multiply your income, right? Which makes more sense. I mean, the second comes from leverage. There's people out there who, for every hour they work, they generate like maybe $20, $25 in income. And then there's other people, for every hour they work, their income is not tied to an hourly rate. And so every hour that they put in, they get like thousands or tens of thousands back, depending on one thing that we're going to talk about in this episode. And multiplying your income it's a change in type, right? It's not about increasing or decreasing. You already understand that if you're watching this, because you reach a lid on your income when you're simply putting in more work to get more back. And that's how most people live. They have to put in more work, more years of education, more credentials piled on top of it. And it's this pushing a boulder uphill type of feeling when you're trying to increase your income versus multiply it. This is not just a philosophical difference. This is a difference in your behavior and in the way that you think. And there is one rule for multiplying your income. And if you get this wrong, you are always going to struggle, even if you understood everything that I just said. Now, some of you are probably wondering, why is this guy wearing a coat indoors? I live in Florida and it's under 50 degrees here, which is pretty much freezing for us. So I know some of y'all live in places where it's snowing. You're thinking, get over it. Well, this feels like I'm on the Alaskan tundra right now. Okay. So I might take this off when we really get busy on this podcast. But today we're going to talk about some very, very deep topics. Okay. I have a lot of books on techniques, shortcuts, things you can do to build your business. I've written dozens of books on that. I can give you all the techniques. I do that on my coaching programs, whether they're one-on-one or one-to-many coaching. But the one thing I'm going to talk about today is the one thing that if you don't get it, you will always be stuck. And you're going to be surprised at some of the stuff you're going to hear. Nobody else is talking about what I'm going to talk about today. It's the number one block that's holding you back from actually achieving the goal of multiplying your income. It's the number one thing holding you back. And I don't even know you. I've never met you, but I can guarantee that this is it, because I've worked enough with people one-on-one and in group settings to where I found that I can give you every single technique, every strategy for writing persuasive copy, for building sales funnels. I've helped a lot of people scale to 6 or 7 figures. And there's one difference between the people who do and the people who don't. And the difference is the people who follow my lead and do the things that I advise. I've been doing this long enough to where I've broken it down to a dependable system and formula that can apply to any business, no matter what it is, any industry, no matter who you are, no matter what your audience is. The question is, are you actually going to follow the instructions point by point? And that depends on what we're going to talk about in this video. The people who do what they're supposed to do to get the result, I've only had one person in over 20 years who did everything that I asked him to do, and he didn't get where he wanted to get. He did actually replace his job with his income, but he didn't get to 6 figures. I think his goal was a little unrealistic, honestly, considering what he was doing. But that's one person out of thousands, and they did manage to get to a result. So I know that the system I teach works, but there's one thing that stops it from getting the result for people. And if you're watching this and you follow my work and the things that I say make sense to you, but you still just feel like you're stuck pushing this boulder up a hill, and you feel like sometimes the boulder starts to roll back on you and crush you. That's what it feels when you're pushing and pushing and pushing, and you're not really creating leverage. Leverage is how you multiply your income, right? You don't put more work into your hour. You put a different quality of work into that hour. And that's what causes more to come back to you. And I'm not talking about any weird woo-woo law of attraction stuff. I'm talking about practical things you can do. So the first thing, and this is going to become very, very important in the age of AI, is showing up as a human being, whether you're showing up on camera, whether you're showing up on sales calls, whether you're showing up on your videos. This is going to be, over the next several years, the number one trump card for people who actually build businesses that give them leverage and freedom. This is going to be the one difference between people who do that and people who neither never get off the ground or struggle or end up working for somebody else is, are you showing up as a human to human person, whether it's on a stage, on a webinar, on a video like this, on your videos? You will not be able to hide behind anonymity and behind AI in the years coming up. And this is already starting to happen. Experts are calling it a trust recession. It's when trust, public trust, becomes very low. Now you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with multiplying my income? The one thing you got to be able to do if you want to make more in an hour than you do now, if you want to make multiples what you do in an hour, is you got to persuade people to buy into your ideas, to buy into your products, to buy into you, to buy into your services. And in the age of AI, it's very easy to pretend that you're an expert, to pretend that you're something you're not. And it's getting even easier to do that. In fact, there are AIs that can make videos that actually look like you moving and talking. And consumers haven't quite caught on to that. Some people know about it. But as people begin to realize that that's what's going on out there in the marketplace, they will be looking for one thing, and that is, who is the human being behind this product I'm about to buy in, this idea I'm about to buy in, this thing that I'm about to put my money into, whether it's buying a product, a service, hiring somebody, investing in something. They will be looking for the human being behind it, right? That is what's happening right now. So if you truly want to reach this result, you've got to show up. Now, this is not the number one secret. We're going to talk about that in a second. But the reason I want people to know this is because you've got to stop this search for this magical business that's going to allow you to sit behind a computer with no one knowing who you are and have all this money coming in. There was a time when you could do that, but that time is very rapidly disappearing and it is never coming back because of what I just said. People aren't going to know the difference. They're going to look at a company or look at a channel or look at a product or service or a brand and say, well, can I really trust this? Well, you can't trust AI by itself because it's being driven by a human, right? The human is deciding whether the AI is going to behave ethically or unethically. And the people who programmed AI and tried to make it ethical, they got it all wrong, and they're still getting it wrong. They're programming AI to be polite and nice, but that is not the same thing as ethical. And AI will pretty much, for the most part, will do what a person asks it to do. It'll even make up stuff itself. AI itself is dishonest. It will sometimes make up things, and it'll admit, I made that up. I made up that statistic. I made up that story. It'll make up stories about you. And so my point is that consumers, people who invest money into your product, into your service, into your idea, you need, look, money moves through people. There's no way around that. The only way to get money to come to you is to get people to agree and say yes to invest it in your idea, in your business, in your product, in your service. That's a universal law, unless you're going to rob banks or something, which I definitely don't recommend. And so showing up as a human being and communicating persuasively and authentically is something you will have to learn. And if you're listening to this and thinking, Seth, I don't ever want to do that, you might as well leave now, because I'm telling you right now that there is no way around that. Now, let me talk to the people who are still here, because if you're still here after hearing me say that, it means you know that this is true, right? You know, Seth, I understand that. I understand I've got to become a better communicator. I've got to communicate more persuasively in my writing, in my videos, on stage, in my webinars. That's the primary thing I teach, is persuasive communication. I've broken it down to a step-by-step formula that you can drill every single day. You can master. You can become a master within 12 months using my system. Okay. So I want to talk to the people who understand that and who accept it and who know, Seth, I understand it. I know I have to show up. I know I have to communicate persuasively, even if it's just in writing. But I'd be willing to bet that if you're either A, not doing that right now, or if you're not doing it enough, or if you're not satisfied with the results that you're getting when people see your videos online, when they attend your webinars, when they hear you speak, when you talk to them on a Zoom call, if you're not satisfied with the results you're getting, that there's one of three reasons that that's happening. The first one is fear of failure. Fear of failure stops people from putting something out there because they keep wanting to get it perfect, because obviously if it's perfect, it's failure proof. There's no such thing as that, by the way. But this is the person who makes a video, spends a bunch of time editing it, and never launches it because there's something wrong with it. Like the one little caption didn't quite place the way they wanted it to, whatever it is. Fear of failure hides behind perfectionism and procrastination. Now, some people, they're perfectionists, but they're still doing things. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the people who aren't doing anything because they're too busy thinking about, well, I don't want to put my videos out there because I don't have my product created yet. That's perfectionism. You start putting videos out there to build your audience, right? So, whatever it is that's causing you to either not show up, or when you show up, maybe you're not showing up as confidently because there's this inner critic that's always going in the back of your head. You're on a sales call and you're asking for the money, or you're selling your idea, or maybe you're doing it on stage on a webinar, but there's this fear of failure. This is fear of getting it wrong. This is fear of not being perfect. That's really either causing you not to show up, or it's causing you to turn the volume down on your confidence and your authenticity and your directness and your vulnerability when you do show up. So that's the first reason, is fear of failure. The second reason is probably something to do with fear of rejection. And it's somewhat for the same reason, but rejection can take a lot of different forms. It can take getting laughed at, getting judged, getting somebody saying, you're just trying to sell something, someone trolling on your posts. Fear of rejection wears a lot of different faces. So it can keep you from showing up. It can keep you from posting your videos, but it can also cause you to do things that hurt you. Like, for instance, I had somebody who had a successful ad out there on Facebook. It was making them a lot of money. And then somebody came along and left a negative comment on it, and they took the ad down instead of just deleting the comment and blocking the person. And that is a fear of rejection that causes somebody to do that. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people start to put content out there. They start to get traction. They start to get results. And then one critic, or maybe a couple of critics, come along, and all of a sudden they shrink back. Your critics are not your audience. They're not your buyers. Okay. Sometimes a person is a critic and they truly have something valuable to say, but most of the time they're a cynical person. A cynical person is never going to buy from you. They're never going to really buy into your ideas and become a fan. Okay. A cynic and a skeptic are different things. A skeptic is asking questions, but they're looking for reasons to buy. A cynic is asking questions because they're looking for reasons not to buy. They say, aha, gotcha. You're a terrible person. I knew you were going to answer it that way. Right? They'll twist the answers that you give, or the responses that you give, into something negative. That's a cynic. Most critics are cynics. But there's a lot of people out there who either won't show up, or who will take their content down, or worse, change the way that they're communicating because of the quote rejection of someone who's cynical. Or maybe no one's rejecting you at all, and you're just thinking, well, what if they do? What if the person says no? What if they yell at me when I ask for money? What if they get mad when I transition into the close? What if people don't like my videos? That's all fear of rejection. Okay. That's the second thing. Now, all these that I'm laying out here are rooted in one thing, and that's the secret we're going to talk about. But that's the second reason normally people aren't showing up and promoting themselves as authentically and as confidently as they can in the marketplace. The third one is a little harder for people to accept, but it's called fear of success. Now, I've found this: people who have fear of success almost never verbally admit that they have it, right? They'll call it all kinds of other things, like shiny object syndrome. That's fear of success, right? Darting from one thing to another instead of focusing on one thing. When one thing starts to get traction, or you're ready to launch one thing, and then you stop last minute and you go, well, wait, I found this other thing that I think is going to work. And you've got a bunch of different unfinished projects. That's fear of success. It's that part of you that is like, well, what am I going to do when this thing gets out there and people start buying it? In other words, the success is causing fear of how you not being able to handle it, you not being able to respond to it. But fear of success can also run a little deeper. And this is something really interesting that I found when a person hits like the six, sometimes the seven-figure mark. Usually it happens when they start to make more money than their parents did working together. Is fear of success kicks in then, because then the success of making more money than their parents brings guilt, because they saw their parents work really hard for that money, and they're not working nearly as hard as their parents, and they're making more money, and they feel bad about that. Now, this is not something people verbally come out and say. Sometimes it takes me a 45-minute or 2 45-minute coaching sessions to actually get a person to see this. But once they do, the fear of success disappears. And so There's fear of failure, fear of rejection, and fear of success. I just want to ask you to do this. If you're listening to this and thinking, well, I don't have fear of success, be a little more open minded, because you very well may have it and you may just be masking it, right? Fear of success typically comes with denial. But if you've got a lot of unfinished projects, things that you started and haven't really launched, or if you launched one thing and it started to get a little bit of traction, but then you took the money you made from that and didn't invest it back into that, you started branching out into other things, that's typically fear of success that does that. There's other ways it can manifest itself, but it usually happens when you hit a certain level of success and something that seems out of your control or seems like totally necessary or smart to do is what stops you. Okay. But those are the three things. Now you'll notice that all three of those have something in common: the word fear, right? Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of success. You could also say fear of asking for money. Some people have that. I think that's tied to the other three. But my point is that we're talking about multiplying your income. We're talking about how you're required to show up human to human to actually make that happen, whether it's on webinars, stage presentations, live videos like this one, recorded videos. You have to show up and show people, hey, I'm a real person, right? I'm not an AI behind this. I'm a real expert. Here's my life. Here's my goal in helping you. Here's how my expertise can help you. And again, people are going to be looking for that. And over the next few years, I'm guessing by the year 2030, the trust recession I'm talking about and the need for people to detect the person behind a brand or the person behind a channel or the person behind a product or service, it's going to be so necessary out there in the marketplace that people who don't show up, they're either A, they're not going to make it and they're going to have to go back to their jobs, or they're never going to get their business off the ground in the first place, or they're going to eventually be swallowed up by some bigger company that's going to, it's going to eclipse whatever they're selling. It's going to sell it cheaper on Amazon, or is going to maybe build a platform that has all the content that they're giving away for free. You will not make it if you don't show up. I promise you that. And by 2030, people are going to be looking at this video and thinking this guy was a fucking prophet. But it's not. It's just understanding human behavior. Okay. So that is going to happen. And to show up, you need to understand that these three fears are, you're probably saying yes right now. I know one of these three fears are stopping me. Maybe you're already doing sales calls, but the fear of rejection is stopping you from really boldly asking for the close at the end. These fears wear many faces. But if you want to get to a point where you're persuading more people, you have to show up to do that. You have to get better at persuasive communication. One of those three fears is holding you back. Now, we'll typically tell ourselves story. I'm going to get to the secret in just a second, I promise, but we got to lay a foundation first. Here's what we'll typically do to ourselves. We have all kinds of rational and reasonable sounding reasons to say, well, it's not fear of success. I just want to learn more. I want to take this course. I want to buy this thing. I want to finish this learning from this course that I'm taking. I want to go to this seminar. I want to build my product. If the thing that you're delaying is showing up in front of people and promoting yourself, it's one of these three fears. I promise. The reason that you give yourself for not doing that is really just a mask. It's a linguistic mask that fear is wearing. Behind it is always fear. No matter how reasonable or how rational it might sound to you, your rational mind is basically a liar. And I'm not saying that to be mean. There's a scientist called Michael Gazzaniga who did some research on this back when they were actually splitting people's brains in half. They don't do this anymore because it's obviously unethical to do, but they were doing that to treat seizures. They were splitting what's called the corpus callosum of a person's brain right down the middle and splitting their left brain from their right brain. Now, the left brain is the logical brain. It's what we call the rational brain. We tend to think that that part of our brain is more honest and more rational. It's actually more dishonest. I'm going to tell you why in a second. But they split what's called the experiential emotional brain, which is the right brain, from the left brain, which is the rational linguistic brain, the brain that actually makes up reasons for doing things. And they found something very interesting. They found that the so-called emotional brain, experiential brain, is actually more honest than the left brain. They found that they had people make certain decisions, and then they went back and they evaluated those decisions and said, why did you do that? And what they found is that if you went, and of course, the right brain side had to draw pictures because it's not capable of language. And the other side, like, was able to use language to give its description, but they communicated with both sides of the person's brain. Again, when your corpus callosum is severed, the two sides of the brain can't talk to one another. It's like you got two people in there. And so what they found is that even when they went back and they told the left brain that it made a decision that it actually didn't make in real time, or they created like some new, like they would say, okay, here's the decision you made, but it's not the real decision. The right brain was capable of telling the people that it didn't actually make that decision and correcting them. But you know what the left brain did? It made up a new rational sounding story to fit the decision that it didn't even make. And they did a lot of experiments like this and basically found that the left brain is basically just an interpreter, a storyteller. This is why you ever seen somebody do something and you're like, why did they do that? It was totally irrational, it was self-sabotaging, but they've got this story that sounds like it makes sense. That's your left brain. Your rational mind is less honest than your emotional mind. That's the science of it. I know some people aren't going to like that, but that's the truth. They've done the experiments on it. And so, whatever rational sounding reason you're giving yourself for not doing the thing, it's not that reason. It's either one of these three things. It's fear of rejection, fear of success, or fear of failure. Now, I'm about to contradict myself in just a second here by talking about fear, but you'll see what I mean. So it's one of these three things. So stop telling yourself that you still need to buy this course, or you still need to read up, or you still need to study. Don't be a learner, be a doer. And if you're not doing and you're just perpetually learning before you launch, then it's fear. You've either got fear of rejection, fear of failure, or fear of success. And it's time to get honest about that and tell that left brain, stop telling me those ridiculous, rational sounding stories for why I'm not doing it. Again, because of what I just said, the left brain will lie to you. And the lies will sound perfectly reasonable, but that's what it's designed to do. It's designed not to interpret reality, but to interpret a decision that may not even match reality. This is a big game changer for people. I talk about this in my book, Awaken Your Shadow, how the part of your brain that you can actually trust more is your experiential brain. It's not your left brain. Your left brain is more dishonest. It'll give you a reason that's not the real reason, but it doesn't matter as long as it sounds reasonable. So I said all that to say this. One of these three things is holding you back. If you're not showing up live on a webinar, on stage, on videos, if you're not doing that right now, knowing what I just said about the age of AI and how people are going to be looking for the human being behind every single brand, you're literally running yourself off of a cliff, because this is coming. It's going to happen. The question is, what is really driving your fear? Because if you're listening to this and you're thinking, Seth, I understand this, I accept that, I'm honest with myself, it really is one of these three fears. If that's true, you've probably been doing a lot of things to overcome or to get rid of fear, right? This probably sounds familiar to some people. Maybe you've done some courses, you've read some books, you've done some affirmations, you've done some somatic work, some meditation, some breath work, some Reiki, whatever it is. You've done a lot of things to try to overcome fear, but it's still there. It's still holding you back. And there's always somebody out there who says, well, it's the reason you still have fear is because you need this 8-week course to do this, this, and this. They've always got a story for why it's still there. But it seems like every single effort you make, you just can't seem to overcome the fear. And meanwhile, you look at these other people out there who seem like they've got it mastered. And it's crazy the results these people are getting. They're selling from stage, they're selling from webinar, they've got a huge following on YouTube or on your social media. And it's like, you're wondering, how did that person overcome the fear? And a lot of the time, what that person is teaching you to overcome fear isn't what they actually did. It's not the real reason. They're just trying to sell you a product that sounds like it's going to get the result, but it doesn't. But let's face it, if you've tried a bunch of things and nothing's working, and this fear has been persistent for months, years, maybe decades, I want you to be open-minded to a new idea. And this is where we're going to get into the secret that I teased you about in the title of this podcast. I want you to be open to the possibility that fear is not really what's holding you back. I know what you're thinking. Seth, didn't you just say it was fear? Well, I use those labels because I knew it's what people would identify with. I knew it's what the left brain was saying to you. So I had to talk to your left brain for a second to get permission to get right here. Okay. What if it's not fear that's holding you back? What if it's something else that, because you've been so busy trying to overcome fear, has gone unaddressed and therefore is still holding you back? What if that's it? Now, I happen to know what it is because I've done enough coaching sessions. But before I get to it, I want to really unravel this, because we're trying to unravel a lot of programming here. Imagine this. Imagine something in your house breaks down. Maybe it's your car. Maybe it's your air conditioner. Maybe it's your refrigerator. and somebody comes out, let's say it's your car, right? Most people know how a car works. You got the engine, you got the transmission, you've got like the electrical system. Somebody comes out, a mechanic, and says, well, it's your electrical system. We're going to fix your electrical system. So they work on fixing your electrical system, and then they give the car back to you and it's still broken. And then you come back and they say, well, it's the electrical system. It's the electrical system. They fix the electrical system. They replace all kinds of parts, take the car out, same thing. It's still not running. How many times would it take you before you went to the mechanic and said, maybe it's not the electrical system? My point is that if it was really the engine or really the transmission or really something else in the car, but the mechanic's trying to fix the electrical system, is it any surprise that the car is still not running? It's not, because he's diagnosed and fixed the wrong problem. Now think about what that means for fear. Is it really possible that as diligent and as smart and as hardworking as you are, which I know you are if you're listening, that you can't master fear, you can't overcome fear? Or is it possible that fear isn't the real problem and the only reason you failed all these years and are still struggling with it is because you're trying to fix the electrical system when the real problem is in the engine? In other words, you're trying to fix the fear, which actually is in your electrical system, it's in your nervous system, when fear is not really the thing. Those stories about fear, where you call it fear, where you use the label fear, is just your left brain labeling something else that's actually holding you back. And once you realize what that something else is and you address it, it'll that one thing that's holding you back will dissolve. I've seen it happen in literally 90 minutes. Now, some of you are probably thinking, well, I think I know what he's going to say here. He's going to talk about trauma. This has nothing to do with trauma. This has nothing to do with inner healing. This has nothing to do with inner child work or self love or any of that stuff that you've heard out there. In fact, you've probably, if you've had like a coaching session or something like that, or maybe you've been through like a coaching course, you've probably found people who will say, we're going to get to the real root cause of your fear. That's what we're going to overcome it because we're going to get to the real root. No one treats the real. You ever notice people who say that? They'll say like, oh, the problem with all these other programs is they only treat the symptom and we treat the root, but then they treat the symptom too. It's like my daddy said, they talk down both sides of their mouth when they're saying those things. That's what my daddy used to say. But they're basically just addressing a symptom too. And what they'll usually do is these coaches that are supposedly help you overcome fear of rejection, fear of failure, all those other things. This is what they'll do. They'll take you on the timeline of your life and they'll find an event somewhere in your childhood, something that was very painful, and maybe it's when your dad yelled at you because you didn't do the dishes, or maybe something much more serious than that. I'm not trying to like minimize this, but they'll take you back to a point in your life, and they'll do some weird, like sort of like, they have timeline therapy and all these other things. They do some visualization. I'm not saying those things are wrong. Those things are good for actually reframing that memory itself. But what they'll tell you is that that memory is somehow the root. This is where your fear started. This is where your trauma started. This is the experience that put this thing in you. What if I were to tell you that the thing that you're battling was there long before that ever happened, and that episode just happened to ignite or trigger it or activate it? Now, this is going to make a lot of sense in just a minute here, but when a person says, I'm going to help you treat the root, listen very carefully to whether they take you to a memory or something on the timeline of your life. If that's what they're doing, they are wrong. They are not treating the root. They're treating an event. The root is actually something deeper that's still inside you. It has nothing to do with what happened. I understand what people say about the body keeping the score and your memory staying inside you. All those things are true, but there's something else behind this. So if it's not really fear, you're probably thinking, Seth, God, you're like exhausting me with this cliffhanger. Okay, what is it? If it's not fear that's holding you back, what is it? There are other emotions that we have, negative emotions, that summon fear when fear is not necessary. Fear is necessary if, like, a Mack truck is barreling towards you and you've got to get out of the way, or if you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, right? Obviously, fear is good. Fear is not bad. You don't want to overcome fear. You want to feel fear when something's happening that can really hurt you so you can get the hell away from it. So all these people trying to tell you like overcome fear, basically what they're trying to tell you to do is that they're going to help you you'd have to amputate your whole body. You'd have to like remove your nervous system out of your body to get rid of fear. That's never going to happen, right? Your nervous system is electrically designed to experience fear. It's natural. And so is it any surprise that when you're trying to get rid of it, it's going to fight you? right? That's why fear seems so persistent when people are treating fear as the problem. Those people who seem fearless, they still feel the experience of fear. There's just one thing different about the way they experience it, which I'll talk about in a second. But you're never going to get rid of overcome fear. And the harder you try, the more frustrated you're going to be. And you're probably the more fearful you're going to be that you're never going to overcome your fear. And it becomes this downward spiral, right? It's not fear that's the problem. Fear is natural. It's normal. We're all born with it, right? You're not going to get rid of it. I mean, you're born with your arm. You can get rid of your arm. You can't get rid of your nervous system. It goes all throughout your body. And that's where fear comes from. But there are emotions that cause fear to show up when fear is unnecessary. For example, there's really, like, think about it. You're afraid to put a video online. Is that fear really necessary? No, it's irrational. Okay. But why is fear showing up? That's the thing you need to do. It's like when you see an enemy or a monster in a dream, you don't fight the enemy. You stop and you look at it and you say, "What do you want? Who are you?" Because it's a part of you, and you're there. It's there to show you something about yourself. But the more you run from it, the more you try to fight it, the more it's going to persist. It's the same thing with fear. You got to ask fear, why are you showing up now? Why is fear showing up when fear is unnecessary? There's actually four emotions that cause this to happen. I have done a ton of research on this, okay? And I've done a lot of coaching calls where I found out that these are one of these four is typically the thing that's really behind what we call fear. And once you realize that, once you realize where these emotions are actually rooted, and they go, yes, they go long, long, long before that traumatic experience that everyone says is the cause of where you are right now. These four emotions actually are embedded in us by our culture. Okay. And they can be unwound, they can be undone, but first you got to understand what they really are. Now, some of you are going to hear these and you're going to go, yeah, that makes perfect sense. One of these emotions you're going to hear and go, now that can't possibly be what's holding me back. Just be open minded. Okay. So here are the four emotions. Well, I'm going to tell you what these are. And I'm going to tell you something about these four emotions that is going to shock you. Okay. The first one is guilt. Guilt, right? If a person feels, let's say a person is going to ask for money, right? And they shrink back and they don't do it. And they say, well, I'm afraid to ask for money. No, probably what happened is they feel guilty about asking for money because they think that if they ask for money for someone else, they're taking something away from somebody that person needs to, like, feed their kids or whatever. But they don't call it guilt. They call it, oh, I'm afraid to ask for money. How do I get rid of it? And they go to YouTube and they're like, fear of asking for money. Or maybe it is, maybe them showing up in front of a lot of people and getting a lot of attention. I mean, think about it. If you were a kid and anything you did to get attention caused you to be punished and to feel guilty over it, what do you think is going to happen if you get up on stage and you do something that's supposed to get you a lot of attention? Well, you're going to feel guilt. Now, Seth, you said that was an event in your past, but that's actually not what caused it. I'm just making a point here. The guilt is going to cause you to shrink back when you step on stage. But what do we say to ourselves? We don't say it's guilt. We say, well, I just got stage fright. I'm afraid of getting on stage. We call guilt fear. Well, for one thing, it's hard to admit you're guilty, right? Like, I mean, it sounds weird to do that. So it's easier to say it's fear. It's also easier to sell you products and to say, yeah, it's your fear instead of trying to get you to admit it's your guilt. But that's the first one. Shame operates the same way. That's the second emotion, guilt and shame. Shame causes you to shrink back. When we shrink back, we think, well, it's fear. Well, it could also be that you're ashamed to ask for money, right? You're ashamed to ask for it because there's something in you that feels that you somehow don't deserve it, right? Maybe like every time you asked for something when you were a kid, and I know I'm going back to your timeline, but that's not actually the cause. We're going to get deeper than that in a second. But maybe like that shame was ignited every single time you asked for something you wanted. You were made to feel shameful for having the desire for the thing. And here you are asking for money. That's something you want. You feel ashamed. This is happening on a subconscious level. But you shrink back and you call it, well, I'm afraid of asking for money. Again, we put the badge of fear on it because it's easier and more convenient to talk about than saying I'm ashamed. It feels weird to say I'm ashamed. But did you know that guilt and shame, those emotions are so strong that people, entire countries, citizens, build millions of citizens within an empire or a country can be subdued using guilt or shame. And if you want to see the science behind this, look up guilt cultures and shame cultures. There's been a lot of anthropological research on this about how people over in the East are typically dominated by the contrast between shame and honor, right? You don't do this because it's going to bring shame to your family. You do this because it brings honor to your family. And they use that to manipulate and control and dominate people. In the West, it's guilt. Don't do this because you're going to be guilty of that. You got to do this so that you can prove yourself innocent. That doesn't just apply to our legal frameworks. It applies to everything we do in life. those emotions tend to die. That's why people work themselves to death over here in the West. A lot of time, it's not really ambition driving them; it's guilt, right? They feel like, "Oh, I'm going to be. I feel bad if I make all this money and I don't work really hard." So we pile on all this extra work to feel like we're actually earning the money, but it's all guilt. Goes back to that. So guilt and shame, again, I'm going to tell you something surprising about these two emotions, but typically fear, those two wear the mask of fear. And the reason we can't overcome guilt and we can't overcome shame is because we're too damn busy calling it fear and trying to overcome fear when fear is not the problem. Guilt and shame cause fear to show up when fear is unnecessary. When you're asking for the money, when you're closing the deal, when you're about to launch a video, whatever it is. Now, the second two are going to sound really weird to some of you, but I'll explain. Just bear with me, okay? The third one is grief. Now you're probably thinking, what the hell does that have to do with anything? Grief means that you're mourning an identity. It doesn't have to be a person. It can be an identity that you feel like you've lost touch with. Like maybe I worked with a guy who was a professional soccer player, right? And he injured his knee and couldn't play. And he was in grief over his identity as a soccer player. And 10 years later, he had all kinds of problems because he was still hanging on to that identity. He was still grieving it like a person who had died, right? So grief doesn't, it's not just when you lose a person, it's when you lose a sense of yourself or lose a sense of your identity. Now, let me tell you what I've seen. This is really, really super interesting. But I just talked to somebody last week who was in this position. They couldn't let go of their old job, and it had nothing to do with them being afraid of taking the leap into their own business. It was because of the grief of that identity that they identified with in that old career dying. They couldn't let go of it. When we dug and found like at the bottom layer, it's like our identity gets so wrapped up in the job or the career that we literally can't see ourselves in something new because we're too damn busy worrying about the death of the old, right? Takes it's ego death. It's death of self. When you let go of it, a lot of people stay in relationships where they're not happy because of grief, right? There's a part of their identity that's so tied up in that relationship that they feel if they lose the relationship, they'll lose a part of who they are. And if they do lose it and it ends, they feel this heartbreak that feels like grief. It's because it's not just the relationship that died, it's the identity of who they were in that relationship. And the longer the relationship is, right? Same thing with empty nesters. Their kids leave the house. Their identity has been so tied up in being a parent that a lot of them, they start fighting after their kids are gone because it's the grief of those old identities. They don't know how to step into that new one. And fear of success typically works like this because if you've grown up poor and you've really like prided yourself on the ability to get by and to fight the battles, to get your rent paid and to take care of people, to show up at work, to work hard, to make sure that everything was covered, you've got some sense of pride and some sense of identity tied up in that. What do you think is going to happen when you suddenly have the opportunity to break free from poverty and get rich? You think that identity is going to die easy? It's not. It's going to hold you back in the form of what's called fear of success. And if you think this can't happen, you're wrong. I've seen it happen to a lot of people that are like, oh, no, I'm never going to have that problem. Boom. As soon as they hit a certain income level, that was more than their parents made or more than they've ever made, all of a sudden, all kinds of self-sabotaging behaviors seem to come from out of nowhere. It's that old identity fighting for its right to survive because letting go of it is going to cause an incredible amount of grief. I have literally had people have funerals for their old identity, funerals for their old business that died, so they could properly grieve it. So grief is another one. And then the fourth one is resentment. This is the fourth emotion. So we've got shame, guilt, grief, and resentment. Now, again, you're probably thinking, what the hell does this have to do with fear? You cannot become the thing that you resent. You can't become the thing you resent. If you want to become a rich and successful person who works a lot less hours and makes a lot more money, but you secretly resent people who already have that result, you're jealous of them, you're envious of them, you have this burning resentment inside your chest, do you think that your conscience is going to allow you to become that person? You cannot muscle your way through this through willpower. You might say, well, yeah, I still feel that, but I'm going to make it anyway. No, you're not. I promise you, willpower will not get you there. It's like holding your breath underwater. You can keep it up for 2 or 3 minutes, but if you don't want to drown, you're going to have to come back up to the surface. Your willpower is going to run out. You cannot become the thing that you resent. If there's a part of you that wants to be healthy and you secretly resent people who are healthy because of the attention that they get, if you want to become wealthy or want to become a successful entrepreneur or want to become a really influential person who's charismatic and who speaks from stage, but you secretly resent those people, your subconscious mind, what I call your value intelligence, will not allow you to act contrary to where you see your own identity. So the more you see yourself as a good and decent and ethical person, and the more you see that person you resent as a bad and terrible person, the worse this is going to be. So your mind is fighting you right now. And it has, I hope you see at this point, it has nothing to do with fear. That's the reason you haven't overcome it yet, is because somebody is out there saying, you got to overcome fear. And here's the antidote for fear. And here's a positive affirmation to overcome fear. And it's just a bunch of nonsense. The thing that's really driving is one of these. Now, you're probably thinking, Seth, how do you know this? How do you know that these four things? There's a lot of research out this. I actually have a book called Finding Your Power Identity, which if you message me on, by the way, I'll give you the book if you message me on social media. It has all this stuff broken down in it. I want to see who's actually motivated to make a change here. But it's called Finding Your Power Identity, and it breaks down the surprising scientific fact that I'm about to lay on you here. Grief, guilt, shame, and fear are artificial. They're not real emotions. Now, I know this is going to shock some of y'all, but there's a lot of scientific research on this where they have found something very interesting about one of these four. Now, this is a good thing. Think about it. If they're artificial, it means that they were implanted in you, and it wasn't by that traumatic childhood experience. That traumatic childhood experience just ignited that guilt, ignited that fear, ignited that resentment, that grief, whatever it is. When you lost that loved one, it ignited grief. But the whole idea, the concept of grief was programmed into this thing you call a brain a long time ago by your culture, or maybe by your upbringing. And I'm going to tell you exactly how that happened, because it's got nothing to do with self-talk. Some people say, well, it's your self-talk, it's your mindset. Your self-talk, remember, that's your left brain. That's the story it's telling. There's something going on at the deeper level, deeper than mindset, deeper than self-talk, deeper than thought, deeper than emotion that I talk about in Awaken Your Shadow. I call it your value intelligence. Value intelligence is a real scientific term, okay? I won't get into that right now, but these are artificial emotions. That's my point. Your body is really experiencing something that you call grief. It's very painful. It feels like anxiety. It feels very, very heavy. Shame is the same way. Guilt's the same way. Resentment's the same way, right? You can feel it in your body. You can feel it in your chest. But the label of grief, fear, shame, resentment, I'm sorry, grief, guilt, shame, resentment. See, I accidentally said fear there. I still got some programming myself. That story was embedded in you, and it can be undone. But that's what's really holding you back. Artificial emotions means that the actual emotion, the electrical feeling, the chemical feeling in your body is something you were born with, but the labels that caused you to shrink back in shame, in guilt, in resentment, in grief, whatever it is, to stop yourself, those are artificially implanted. And they're implanted in the weirdest freaking way that none of you have probably heard of this before, but there's a great book about it called Metaphors We Live By that talks about cognitive metaphor. A metaphor is the thing from which your language and your speech and your belief and your mindsets and all that stuff that's constantly going on, all that monkey chatter that's going on up here in your brain is actually deriving from a deeper interpretation of something. I'll give you an example. But this is what's at the root of it. And the thing that I do in my work, because I'm going to run out of time here. The thing I do in my work is I don't look for people's language and for their self-talk and figure out, the first thing I look for is it grief, guilt, shame, or resentment holding them back, right? But then the second thing I listen for is not their self-talk, because that's what people will say. Like, we're going to like change your self-talk, do this positive affirmation. But the positive affirmation doesn't really work. There's something deeper going on. Then I look for the deeper metaphor or concept that's actually driving guilt or shame. Now you're probably thinking this sounds really, really, really weird, but once you realize what this is and you dissolve this, it'll change everything. I'll give you one example before we wrap up today. What do I mean by metaphor? All language is metaphor. All language is conceptual, right? When we talk about money, think about how we talk about money. Money's not actually, it's a sign of something, right? Currency represents energy. It represents the exchange of energy. Right. And that's a kind of an abstract, hard to quantify thing. So they invented this thing called currency that represents energy, but it's really just energy. And when you multiply the quality of your energy that you bring to the interaction, that's when you multiply your income by getting more people to buy stuff at a larger scale. Right. But think about how we think about money. We think about money like it's actually a finite resource that you actually have more of or you have less of. And we tie it to the idea of hard work. So our conceptual understanding of money and hard work, those two things are mapped together in our brain. This is called conceptual metaphor. It's where we can't think of one thing without thinking the other. They're like tied together in our brain. They're wired very deep in who we are. And so our metaphorical representation, our conceptual representation of money is so tied to hard work and so tied to the idea of increase and decrease that the idea of expansion and multiplication through ingenuity and through putting more quality of energy into it, it's like a foreign language to us. And we can say, well, I believe in abundance and I believe in prosperity and I'm going to multiply my income. We can say all those things. But if the deeper metaphor is still tied to the understanding of money as this thing that either increases or decreases, and that is tied to your hard work and your energy and your effort, it's not going to matter how many positive affirmations you put. In fact, that metaphor, that underlying metaphor of money as this thing that kind of moves like this instead of like this, it's going to fight. And you're going to feel this weird sort of like resistance from inside you. And you're going to feel phony when you're saying your affirmations. And eventually you're just going to stop doing them. And they're not really going to work. It's kind of like you're painting over rotten wood. That's why positive affirmations don't work. Something else does. But the point is that grief, guilt, shame, and resentment all have their own metaphorical representations, concepts from which they derive. We won't have time to get into this, okay? But the book, if you really want to take a deep dive on this, my book, Finding Your Power Identity, actually shows you that there's a concept that you have about guilt, about shame, about grief, and about resentment, and they're tied to your concept of your identity. And this is something that you don't even realize you have until even when you speak, you don't realize it. You can say, I'm an infinite being of infinite self-worth. But if there's this something else operating at the deeper level that says that you're a person whose value is tied to your ability to get a result, that's the dominating metaphor in your heart, right? That's where you're actually evaluating yourself based on whether or not you measure up to something. It's like you're a measuring stick, right? The metaphor is a measuring stick, or maybe the metaphor is what's in your bank account, right? Your identity, your understanding of your worth is so tied to that thing at a deeper level that you can change the language, but it's like a river, right? Like a river, if a river is poisoned and there's poisoned water coming down the river, you can take buckets and try to pull the poisoned water out all you want, or you can go upstream and actually find the source of the poison and get rid of it. Well, that source is our cognitive metaphors. It's our larger, broader conceptual representations of the idea that we're talking about, whether it's our identity, our relationship with others, the act of buying and selling itself. All these things have deeper structures that we are not consciously aware of. Now, our left brain is going to tell us all kinds of stories about what it really is. Well, it's fear, it's fear, it's fear of rejection, it's fear of failure, it's this, that. All those things, even the labels that we put on our self-sabotage, are all derived from our old concepts. We can get rid of them, but it's very hard to do, right? That's what I do in my work. Now, listen, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, Seth, you kind of lost me on that last point, it's because I cannot, this is where I cannot actually tell you personally how this is holding you back, because I would have to get on a one-on-one conversation with you and talk about your fear of rejection, your fear of failure, your fear of success, and figure out what is the conceptual understanding behind this. What is it? Guilt? Is it shame? Is it resentment, or is it grief? And what conceptual understanding was embedded in you by your culture or by your upbringing a long time ago that actually represents your self-worth? What it means to be shameful or honorable, what it means to be guilty or innocent, what it means to be resentful or celebrating of someone, what it means to be grieving or accepting. All of those come from a basic, deeper belief that you have about what you're worth and the thing that you're doing is worth. And this is the reason we came to a halt here on this one-to-many presentation, is because I got to talk to you one-on-one. But let's recap what we've talked about. To multiply your income, you're going to have to show up as a persuasive communicator. There's no question about that, especially in the age of AI. If you think fear of success and fear of failure and fear of rejection are holding you back, the truth is that's just a mask that other emotions wear that are actually holding you back. And it's either going to be guilt, shame, grief, or resentment. It's going to be one of those four. The good news is those four emotions are artificial. They're created by stories and concepts that we ingest from the time that we start learning language. Those concepts are called cognitive metaphors. There's a whole book on it called Metaphors We Live By if you want to take a deep dive into that. Or if you message me on social media, I'll send you my book, Founding Your Power Identity. But here's the bottom line. Here's the takeaway. Stop trying to overcome fear. Ask yourself, what's really speaking here? Is it guilt, shame, bitterness, which is resentment, or grief? And then you got to ask yourself, and you probably need to get on a call with me if you really want to overcome this. What is the deeper understanding that's actually causing me to feel guilty about something that should not feel guilty, because guilt's not even a real emotion, it's artificial, right? That is the number one secret to multiplying your income. See how many layers down we had to go? If you want to multiply your income, you got to show up. If you got to show up, you got to get rid of fear. You got to realize it's not really fear that's causing us one of these four emotions. You got to understand what drives these emotions. And I have a 7-step process that I take people through. It takes about 90 minutes to do. We do a discovery session with the person. That usually takes 90 minutes. So we have a discovery session where we find out what are these beliefs that are really holding you back. And then we have a second session where we actually clear it out. We do what I call a somatic axiology meditation. It's kind of complicated. And then there's a maintenance program we do after. But I can tell you this is the last thing I'm going to say today. All these people who are trying to sell you these expensive retreats and 8-week programs and 12-week programs and 1-year programs and all this stuff that hasn't worked, none of them that I've seen so far are actually tackling things at the root like this. I don't know a single person who is. Maybe they're out there and I haven't heard of them, but I don't know anybody who is. It does not take 8 weeks to do it. You can do it in 3 or 4 sessions. And the difference that it makes in your confidence, what you call confidence, because you already have confidence. You don't need more of it. You just need to take the brake off of the, like, you need to, like, you're pushing the gas with one and you're holding the brake with the other. You just need to take the foot off the brake. That's it. You got plenty of confidence, natural confidence. That'll start coming out, and all those fears, those so-called fears that held you back, they'll just disappear like a stain of breath on a mirror. Will you still feel fear? Yeah, but it won't cripple you because it won't be tied to one of the other emotions. Okay. Whew, that was a lot for today. I'm going to see if there's a question in here. There's a lot of people showed up here for Monday, but I'm going to quit in just a second here. If anyone has a question about this, but again, we're talking about overcoming fear and knowing that fear is not the real problem. And that's why most people don't do it. Is because they're trying to fix fear. Fear is not the real problem. So, of course, the real problem persists because fear is the distraction. This makes all the difference in how you show up on your sales calls, on your webinars, in your videos, on social media. It all boils down to this. Now, I'll drop you one more thing. If y'all are thinking, well, I want to know, like, what can I actually do about this? What's the next step that I can take? Just follow me on YouTube. Okay. Follow my videos. And if you watch a couple more of my videos on this, and if there's like this splinter in your brain about it and you're thinking, I believe this guy can help me. I want to overcome this. I want to get in touch with him. I want you to reach out to me and start a conversation. I'm not going to send you through a sales funnel or anything like that because I actually don't have one for this. I just want to talk to you. I'll either get a book to you that'll help, or we'll talk about working one-on-one. That's all I've got for today. Hope this was helpful for everybody. I will see you in the next live video.